Hello everyone, Eric here, and today we're going to take a look at a lot of blue inks that have red sheen to them. And the reason I'm doing this is it seems that every single manufacturer has a version of a blue ink with red sheen, and the hits just never seem to keep coming or stop coming. And I'm going to gather these up and we're going to look at them and see, do we really need all these blue inks with red sheen? And literally every manufacturer seems to have a version of it. So this is Tomoe paper, just A4 papers. We're going to use the same one for everyone. And the first of these blue inks that I got with red shimmer was the Diamine Polar Glow, with this kind of like this odd shaped bottle that they use regularly. And we're going to do a couple things here. I'm going to swab each one of these. Put a little extra in here too. Give that a chance to dry while we take the glass pen and also we'll do a little writing sample too. I really enjoy using a glass pen. This is just a cheap one that I bought on Amazon for like $8, and I've got a couple of them in my drawer, so if I break the tip or something happens, I have backups. And a number of pen shows, I have seen lots of glass pens, and I just can't bring myself. For some reason, I have no problem buying a fountain pen, but I have problems spending money on glass pens. And it makes no sense, but that's just kind of the way I have looked at it. And so I use these, and I have a couple times broken them where they break. And I don't try to tune them, I just bring out another one. So I'm also going to do a little kind of drop test on these too, so we can see how they look when they smear. So you can see what's really inside that ink. Oh, that didn't totally work out the way I wanted it to. So I'll let that dry. You can start to see some of the red sheen. It's actually a purplish red sheen show up in there as well. The other one which I bought and didn't realize how close these two inks were Wearingeul's Phantom of the Opera from their series where literary inspired art or inks. And wow, this is not opening. There we go. And we'll see how similar these two really are. They always seem very similar when I ink them up. This seems just a little richer and darker. A little bit. Put a little extra dollop in there so we can really see that come through. This will go. The Phantom of the Opera. Already getting a little thin. So you can see they are incredibly similar inks. They do have a lot of the same color properties. The sheen comes out almost a purpley red, as you can see. It's not fully dry. We'll bring it up again when it is dry. They are very, very similar inks. I'm actually going to put this piece of paper aside for a moment and bring out a fresh one because I have 4 other inks that I want to show that all come from the same maker, which is Birmingham Pen Company. And so I'm going to put all those 4 on the same sheet so we can see the differences between them. So we will start. The 4 that I have to share are Ice Rink, Railroad Spike, Tesla Coil, which is probably their most popular of these, and Voltaic Arc, which is actually, I use this ink a lot. So, in fact, it's probably the one that's been used the most of these four. So I will put these out of the way. We'll start with Ice Rink and swatch that up first. And we'll take a look at how it, this is definitely, oops, wow, there we go. A very blue. So let's go ahead and swatch this up. Put it aside. Get out my pen. This is Ice Rink from, these are all Birmingham. I'm trying to go fast, I'm not really giving the pen a chance to load. Ice Rink. So I can just kind of ignore that spot when we are looking at these later. Got a nice chunk of that on my finger as well, as you can see. Inky finger is a sign of character, I believe. Okay, now this next one is Railroad Spike, which is, I don't think this is it was the first of these I think that I bought, of these Birminghams. And I'm just such a sucker for Birmingham ink that it often, if there's a shade they put out that I like, especially if it's a higher saturation ink, I tend to gravitate towards it. So you can see here, this is a much grayer ink. It is, still has those blue properties, and you'll see the red coming out. But the, this is a really nice ink for correspondence. I use this a lot and often keep this inked up. I used to use this all the time until I got the Voltaic Arc, which we're going to try in a moment. And the Railroad Spike is just on the page, beautiful blue, gray, really saturated color. And it has that sheen when you hold it up to the light. As you see that little bit of test there, you can see that really pops with the, you can see that how blue that is inside that ink. Next is the Tesla Coil, which you'll see right here. This ink is probably one of Birmingham's biggest hits, or at least a hit right now. And it gets used a lot. And I understand why, because this is just such a nice blue color. And I should have put the Railroad Spike here, because I could just covered up that little droplet of Ice Rink. So if I take my glass pen, see here, Tesla Coil, already, even though it's still wet, I can already see that really super sheen come out of that ink. That is a characteristic. This is like somebody put a battery in this ink. It's so set, it has so much sheen to it, and so much saturation of that sheening color. And I'll put this over here, a little bit more, a little bit wetter. And that away. You can see the richness of that color. Let me put this on. Then we'll get the Voltaic Arc. Oops, I should put this cap on so I can show you the front. Obviously, well-loved bottle has got marks all over it and stains. This really is an amazing super sheener of an ink that I really, this is probably, I actually have this in 2 different pens right now. I keep a set of pens up here in my office. I also keep another set of pens downstairs because when I do my writing in the morning, I'm usually down there. So there's usually 2 pens that I have down there for that, and I keep the rest of them up here. Again, you can already see just how vivid that sheen is already. And just to put a little writing sample here, I probably have to buy another bottle of this. Voltaic Arc. And I think when we're done with these, we'll kind of zoom in on them a little bit so you can really see how the sheen looks. Though this is still very wet, you can already see here the kind of intense ring of color that's emerging in this really wet spot. There's a wave over here, waves through here. Really interesting amount of sheen that comes out of that ink. It's kind of crazy. So these are the 4 Birmingham inks, and I think what I'll do is I'll just move this down a little bit so you can really take a close look at them. If we look at over here with the ice rink, it's really subtle. I mean, you do see it through some of these, the red in here. It's really subtle. You see one of these dots here. You can see it in some of the lines. It's impressive how it is more of a, for how some of their other inks are less restrained. This one is very, very subtle. The railroad spike on this Tomoe River paper, it's not sheening as red as it usually does. I'll see, I'll pull up here the card. Look at the card, you can definitely see the red as it comes through, especially in that thicker area there. A couple dots down here. Whoops, I'm a little too close. So you can see that there. You're not seeing as much on the Tomoe River paper. You do see some accents of it, but it's mostly kind of mixed in there. The Tesla Coil, though, again, is like, it's amazing how much red pops through there, the purplish red, and you can see it throughout here. There's a big, huge section of it. If you hold it, even if you're looking at these things down here, you can see it really clearly in there. If you hold it somewhat at an angle to the light, you can even see more sheen pop through there. In the Voltaic Arc, it's still not completely dry, but you just look at all that incredible amount of red sheen that comes through here. And also, you can also see it on the letters themselves here, how it's just even light reflection off this ring light, you're seeing some of that sheen pop through there. So really impressive. It would be nice to see a little bit more variety between some of these 4. And I'm sure there are others in their line that have that same kind of sheening quality. I don't see, you see the red popping out here, some red popping here, not as much here. I'm just kind of curious what happened if I put a little bit of water on this. You see a lot more green when you do that to it. Through here, you can see the green that's in there too. It's there's a lot going on inside that ink. On the Tomoe River, it's not as red as it is on in the card, which you can see here. So I put these aside, and we'll go back to our other sheet that has fully dried by now, and you can really see, again, we're going close on these. You can see definitely the red on the Polar Glow, which I think is, again, the first one of these that I bought. And then you have also here on the Fan of the Opera, you see that same effect again. You see it a little bit more subtly on this paper. Seems like a little too close for the focus. There we go. Little bits here and there. You really see a streak of red through here. Again, circling around this little dot, original dot before I smeared it, that has, you can see just an electric amount of red to it. And even the small writing samples, that shows you how pronounced that can be, especially when it's really wet. You'll see up here that when the glass pen was kind of running out of ink, there's not as much sheen. In fact, it's no sheen. Kind of like, look how Wearingeul, and then as you go through, you see the sheen just slowly disappear. But when I re-inked, you see it very heavily here throughout these slashes, and then obviously through here as well. So these two, surprisingly similar to each other. And once it's dried, again, the Phantom of the Opera is slightly darker, but the two are very similar. So let's move on to some other inks that are in the same family of different makers, different variants on this. This is Octopus Fluid Cerberus, which is, it says it's a copper sheen. I think it's a little bit more red, but let's take a look and see. Much darker than the other two. Some thinner spots, maybe put a little droplets in here too to show as it dries. A lot of saturation on this. You can already see the red emerging here as the sample dries. Get a clean finger here. There we are. Okay, the next I'm going to do is the Endless Alchemy, which is the Candy Sea. As you can see, it's again, this guy's such an unusual bottle. It's got this kind of like nipple-like bulb here that when you sit it in the coaster, it sits completely still, which is good, right? But if you leave the coaster gone, the bottle will move around. And when you're like using a dip pen, that's actually a kind of interesting way to do it, because then you can get a little bit better angle going in there. I tend not to. I don't tend to use these very much without a pen or converter involved, so okay. Oops, forgot to use a swatch. A similar color to Phantom of the Opera, with kind of like a kind of in between the two of those. I like this in a pen. I've used this in a pen several times. I am a big pen writer, or letter writer. I try to write a letter to someone every day. Sometimes it's a short thank you note. Sometimes it is a longer letter. I have been doing this for quite some time now, and I have some people who have received a monthly letter from me, and some people I've written to just once. And every once in a while I find myself a little stuck for who to write to. As you can imagine, you run out of people after a while, even when you've been fortunate enough to have as many friends around you as I have. But I just recently wrote a letter to someone I hadn't spoken to in 20 years, just like, hey, how you doing? I mean, we send each other Christmas cards. We like each other's posts on social, but we haven't spoken. And so I wrote a letter to this person, and I'm thinking of this because it was a pen with this very ink in it that I wrote that letter with. So let me move this out of the way. So let's take a zoom in and look at some of these. Again, if you look at this Octopus Fluid ink, wow, what an amazing amount of sheen. You see throughout any thick spot, you see that red. And even on letters, they're just like, looks like they're, just have this, like, they jump off the page. This writing, oh, that's a little, sorry, that's a little too close. Ends up taking it out of focus, it looks like, at least. Try this instead, how about that? That looks right. So just an amazing amount of sheen, and it kind of leaves people when they read it, like, what color am I looking at? Am I looking at a black? Am I looking at a blue? Am I looking at something like purplish? And it's just, nothing seems to quite fit, which is really a nice way to have ink. Again, you look, even at this drop smear, there's a huge amount of beautiful sheening coming through that blue. And again, the Candy Sea, even though it's still not 100% dry, you just see this beautiful amount of sheening happening throughout the entire thing, which is great. And then again, that same sort of almost like glowing quality to the text and the writing. Smeared a little bit of it. And again, you see that sheening popping out throughout this ink. Just beautiful. Just four beautiful inks. I'm not convinced that the world needs to have all this number of blue inks with red sheen, but it definitely, these are four beautiful ones. So I have a handful more to go. I even had a couple others that to bring out that, like, these are samples that I had that I don't use, I've used up. And Robert Oster has a version of the blue with the red sheen. You can really see it here. It's a much lighter blue than many of the ones we've been looking at, but you can see the red sheen popping out at any kind of point where some ink had a chance to dry. And Colorverse Season 8 Bow Shock is also just has a lot of these same qualities to it. It's I think a richer, more royal blue with this red sheen in it. And again, I'm not going to ink these up because I have these swatches here. I don't even have the ink anymore. This is old ink samples. I'm going to grab another piece of paper, and we will do the remaining ones, and then we'll line some of these up and take a look at them comparatively. So there are 1, 2, 3 more to do. The first is Colorverse. This is a weird one to include in this because it doesn't, I'm not 100% sure what it's going to look like on the Tomoe River paper, but on the swatch, it ends up looking very much in line with these others. You'll see it's almost a green. The blue-green, you can see where it's smeared down here at the bottom. You can really see the blue in it, though. And it's got the red sheen to it, and you see it up here in the letters, too. I guess kind of like the other one where it just got progressively less sheen to it. But it is kind of a greenish blue, but I'm going to put it in with this so we can look at it compared to the others. Again, 2024 Blue Dragon. I guess there's a couple varieties of this. This is whatever. This is not anything special about it outside of that it is it's a special ink, but it's not the other versions seem to have other qualifications that separate them away. Again, like much more of a greener ink than we've seen on a number of these others. Even if it is a very greenish ink, it calls itself Blue Dragon, so I'm choosing to include it in a listing of blue inks with red sheen. Not sure if I have any more clean fingers left. I could do with that one. And 2 more that we'll look at as well. This is Diamine's Taj Mahal. It's a Cult Pens exclusive that I just recently got. I placed an order at Cult Pens and bought nothing except for exclusives, because obviously why buy them from them and have them shipped from the UK if I can get them anywhere else? I live in Montclair, New Jersey, which means I have a number of really amazing stores within a reasonable distance of me. Gold Spot Pens is very close to me. In the city where I have an office, I also have really close to just a stopway or two on the subway from Fountain Pen Hospital, and also can go over to Goods for the Study very easily, and also can Yoseka, which is in Brooklyn, which is a really weird part of Brooklyn because it's very inaccessible if you aren't in Brooklyn. If I go over there, sometimes I'll even take a car because it's just such a kind of pain in the butt to get over there. That's a great shop. They had their stationery fest this summer, which was really fun to go visit. It was a real top of the line pen and paper and stationery, and it was, I think, a broader definition of than you would get any normal traditional pen show, but I think that's one of the things that made it so interesting. And there were great workshops, and the vibe was great, and it was very Brooklyn-y in the sense that it was not a crowd you would see at another pen show. Probably the closest proximity would be the San Francisco Pen Show if you look at the type of people who attend. And there are lots of Brooklyn hipsters buying their Japanese stationery, and it was a very good vibe, and it was really fun to go to. So I would suggest that if you ever find yourself, they do it again. I hope they certainly do. We'll see. Clean finger. Here we go. And this is a very rich blue, and I like this level of saturation. Oh, look how this is drying here. This is really just, again, looks like it's glowing, almost, the intensity of the sheen. And one more to do. This is a Vinta inks. It's Oras is the name. This is something I bought at Atlas Stationery when I was going through Chicago. I'm fortunate enough, I should probably shake this up a little bit. Yes, and I should, because this is the one shimmer ink, which it also is debatable whether or not this should even be in this group. If we look at the card, I've gone back and forth. In certain lights, this looks very gray. In certain lights, it looks very blue, but it is a shimmer ink, which I'm not huge on to begin with, but you'll see the red and just outside the intense amount of kind of green shimmer. When you look past that, you do see the red is the sheen. So it's like purpley blue ink with a red shimmer and then kind of green, it's a dark blue with a red sheen and a green shimmer to it. It's kind of like there's a lot going on in this ink, but I've never put this in a pen. This is a fairly new. I just got this recently, as you see, in October. I do get around quite a bit for business, and I often will stop in stationery shops and pick things up when I'm in cities, or at least visit and take a look at them. And again, on this Tomoe River paper, we may not see it quite the way we do on the swatch card. We'll give it a shot. And this is the Vinta Oras. And very wet writer. I think I have one finger left. Oh, you can really see the purple kind of emerging. You see the purple emerge on the paper. Perhaps this doesn't qualify as a blue ink, but maybe it's instead a purple ink. But I'm still going to include it in this list. So there's a lot going on in this ink. This is really nice. I often have trouble figuring out what should go in a pen and which is better for dip. I told you something that wasn't entirely true earlier. I have this sample, this Colorverse of Bow Shock. I still have some left over. It was an ink journal sample that I got as part of the ink journal subscription. If you haven't tried that before, it's really worth trying. It's very a great way to introduce yourself to lots of different inks. I have quite a few bottles. I would love to be in a world where I can just buy small samples, and if I use it and I like it, I can then buy the bottle, which is what I try to do. And so many people do offer samples of ink, but I just find myself often trying out a lot of inks, and most of them I don't use again. I keep the swatch cards for reference, but I'm not sure I would ever buy Beauchoc because, again, I have all these other inks at my disposal, which is basically doing the same thing. Beauchoc. On the pen. Again, I'm watching it dry as I'm doing the scratches here, and I'm not seeing something that really speaks to me as all that special compared to all the others. I've inked this up once, and I have enough left here to do it again. And I don't know if I would, because I'm just not sure I need it in my life. This way. So I'm going to let these dry, and as they're drying, we'll look at some of the others that we have looked at. Again, we'll look them up close first. Again, you'll see here this Colorverse, the Blue Dragon. It is, you can see that intense amount of red. It's a very, almost like teal green ink. And again, the writing just looks like it's glowing. It has electric, it has so much sheen to it. You can see coming off the ring light here how much intense color there is going on there. The Taj Mahal. On this paper, not as much sheen, though you do see it here in the outlines. You see a lot of it here in the text. Right. See a lot of it here in the text. The intensity of the sheen, not as much in the swatch. And then Oras from Vinta, that's just got so much going on. It's very purpley blue ink. It does have the red sheen, and then of course on top of it, it's got the green shimmer to it. And again, you look at this text, you're seeing all three of those play out. You're seeing the blue ink, you're seeing the red sheen, you're seeing the green shimmer. Not as much in this area, though you do see some of it. And again, you see the purple undertones here throughout from that ink. Very impressive. The Beauchoc is not completely dry, the sample, but again, similar behavior. Very rich, saturated blue. The sheen is so powerful that it ends up kind of changing the color of the ink in a lot of spaces. And then over here you have just this electric looking writing, the sample. Beautiful, beautiful ink. But again, do I need it when I have 11 other sheening inks? So I can't fit these all into one thing. But again, just to go back again, we will compare these two. And you see a lot of the differences here and similarities. I'm again looking at Beauchoc and wondering, why would I need that if I had Polar Glow? When you're looking at these two next to each other, they're pretty much the same color of ink. Again, if you're a fan of the opera, it's pretty much the same color of ink. I give Colorverse a lot more, it's super sheening qualities. Not sure I need it. There's even a little bit of similarities you can see between the Vintas, if you took that shimmer away, and the Octopus Fluid Cerberus, I guess. And when you bring in the Birmingham's on top of that, again, you're seeing so many similarities here between these inks. Tesla Coil, which is like a super version of Polar Glow, much more intense. Sheen, let's put that next to these two. They're basically the same ink, the Tesla Coil and the Beauchoc. It's basically exactly the same color, or really, really close. If you look at Sea Candy and compare that to Ice Rink, very similar colors, though Ice Rink has a little bit less sheen to it. But you know, you are seeing an awful lot of similarities between all these colors. And I'm sure every company wants to have their version of it, but as a consumer, I'm not sure that I need all these different inks coming at me. So that's it, all pulled from my collection. It's been a question I've always wanted to know of what these inks look like when they're all linked up next to each other, because I look at the cards and I'm just seeing an awful lot of similarity between these inks. And if I had to pick a favorite, I'm still very, very fond of this ink. Look as it's dried, the Voltaic Arc. You're seeing light blue, dark blue, purple, red, Sheen. Kind of some of the times, it's, especially when the ink is a little heavier, it is really kind of obvious effect, and other times it's much more subtle. Long been a fan of Railroad Spike because I just love how it does this and is somewhat subtle about it. You can make the same argument about Ice Rink. Tesla Coil is very, very popular, but to be honest with you, it's a little trying too hard for me. I think I like a little bit more of a subtler effect, which is probably why I loved these two so much when I first got them. I'd put the Cerberus in that same category of feeling like it's doing a good job without overdoing it. If I really wanted, if I looked at it next to Voltaic Arc, for example, there's a lot of similarities. The tone isn't similar, but the ink behaves similarly. And I would probably rethink buying a couple of these inks. I don't know if I would necessarily have bought the Taj Mahal if I'd known it was going to end up looking exactly like Tesla Coil, which I already own. And look at these collections here, like, why would I need these? So I think as these inks run out, like, what would I buy again? That's always a good question. What would I buy again? Voltaic Arc, certainly would buy again. Railroad Spike, would certainly buy again. Ice Rink, feels replaceable. Tesla Coil, feels like it's doing too much work. Blue Dragon is a green with that shimmer, which is nice. Maybe I'd buy it again, I doubt it. Taj Mahal, definitely wouldn't buy. Blowshock, wouldn't buy. Vinta Oras, I think Oras, I think I would. I'm never going to run out of that bottle because I can't imagine how often I'm going to use that. But if I did, I might think about it because there's a lot going on here and it's not overwhelming, but probably not. Octopus Fluid, wouldn't buy that again. Polar Glow and Phantom of the Opera, would buy one. Between these three, for example, the Candy Sea, Phantom of the Opera, and Polar Glow, I'm not feeling like I'm getting any of these I'm not getting from the others. While there's subtle variations between them, they're basically, to me, writing on with these inks, they're going to be the same ink. So I think I could find myself buying one of these and not ever buying another one again. So that's my story. I'm sticking to it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and talk to you soon. Look how inky my fingers are. Oh.